Saab 9000 is the last car that Saab ever made. Now, if that line sounds familiar to you, that's because it's the exact same opening line I used for the Saab 95NG. You see, a lot of people will tell you that once GM got their grubby mitts on the Saab brand, that was the end for Saab. And the 9000, it was the last pure Saab which was built by them without any interference from General Motors. So from a certain point of view at least, this is the last Saab ever made. But of course, famously, that might not even be true about this 9000 because it was actually based on the Fiat Type 4 platform, which was a joint venture between Fiat and Saab. And they obviously produced this, the 9000, but they also had the Fiat Chroma, the Lancia Tamer, and the Alfa Romeo 164. But of course, typically Saab, they had to do things their own way. Instead of using Bako foil to build the doors, Saab instead used the metal from a Swedish battleship, which is why you have these big, fat, thick doors. A high level of safety, which basically meant that this car was the safest thing on the roads at the time. It was a completely new market segment for Saab to go up against cars like the BMW 5 Series and the Mercedes E-Class. It's a big car, long wheelbase and a lot of space inside. The 9000 was introduced in 1985, initially as this hatchback version, which later became known as the CC. Then they introduced the saloon car, the CD, or the Corps Diplomatique, as it was known, the fancy luxury saloon car. Now the hatchback, of course, had an absolutely enormous amount of space in it, an extremely practical vehicle. This particular car, and I have to say thank you to Zach from IGM Pedigree Motors, who's just standing there behind the camera, is an absolutely fantastic example of a 9000. Now it has done 200,000 miles, but in the last 5 years it has had a fair chunk spent on it. Picture a number in your head, think how much money could this car possibly have had spent on it in the last 5 years? Think of a number, get the number here for you. And you're wrong, because it's £38,000 that has been spent on this car in the last 5 years. The mileage is essentially irrelevant because it is an absolutely fantastic condition car. Oh God, it feels proper Saab in here. Absolutely awesome. As you know, I bloody love a Saab. And I want to say at this point, just so we're clear, I love all Saabs. I love the GM ones as well. It's not just these older ones. The new ones are good too. And whatever you think about GM, yes, they probably did ruin Saab in the end. They did build some quite nice cars before they finally let that brand die. This car is an early one. It's an E-Reg. And interestingly, I am also an E-Reg. I'm 1 month older than this car, as it was registered in 1987. So when this car came out back in the 80s, for a lot of Saab diehards, it was actually a little bit controversial because, for one, it doesn't really look like a Saab. So I think it would have taken those diehard people to get in this car before they realised that, yes, all is okay, it is a Saab. I mean, for a start, the doors, they just shut with that solid clunk of, Swedish engineering. It's festooned with this really beautiful wood. You've got that classic Saab dashboard, which is like angled towards you. Now, this car is the SE, it's the 9000 SE, so it's the high-spec car, and it's got basically no blanks. There's one button here, which I don't know what it does, but everything else is filled in. The trip computer, you can switch between the time and the temperature, which is in Fahrenheit or centigrade, and then you've got all your different bits of information, like your average speed, the kilometres that you've travelled, how far you've got to go. In 1987, that would have been absolutely futuristic high-tech, wouldn't it? Automatic climate control, which I've switched on now, and it's just changing the fan speed depending on what it feels like you need, with your readout in, again, centigrade or Fahrenheit, which you can switch with this tiny little switch, which is just so satisfying to use. And of course this all works. Now I don't know if that's because it's part of that £38,000 has gone on fixing it, but it all works and it's great. You can switch the temperature on the climate control down to the floor. You've got bi-level, which presumably means both screen and in your face, and then you've got vent for your face. Below the climate controls are the dials built by VDO, which is the same as in my Mercedes actually. They tell you the oil pressure, the oil temperature, and the battery voltage as well. Apparently these dials are quite rare and expensive to replace. I've got heated seats, of course, and in the classic Saab style of seat with the strange headrest that sort of rolls over the top of the chair. And these seats have been completely refurbished, reconolized, and they have got all the padding. They're super soft. As we know with Saabs, they're just so comfortable, aren't they? That's something they do so right. Triple Saab dials, which come from the previous car, the 900 and the 99 before that. And then, of course, 3 dials built into the last one on the right, which has your engine water temperature, the turbo boost gauge, of course, which is absolutely required in a car like this, a Saab turbo, and then your fuel as well. And then in this 9000, which I've not seen in any Saab previously or since, is a little diagram of the car. It obviously tells you things like when the doors open, apparently it tells you when the bulbs are out, but it also has the little oil warning light on top of the bonnet as well. So it's just like a little pictogram of everything that is right or wrong with your Saab. Now, as I turn the ignition on here, I'm reminded that this car has anti-lock brakes, which would have been one of the very first cars to have that. Of course, Saab thinking of safety. A little screen underneath, which with this car being an automatic, the selected gear is there. Also the battery voltage again, so I've got double battery voltage readout. Just in case you didn't know what your battery voltage was, you will always know in this Saab. Now, there are a couple of things I recognise that have been brought over from the previous generation. Well, I say the previous generation. It is important to note that actually this car didn't replace the 900. This is a bigger, higher spec car than the 900. This eventually became the 95, so it's the bigger car, despite the fact that it's actually shorter than the 900, but it does have a longer wheelbase, so there's more room inside. This light switch here, that's directly from the older Saabs, as are these big chunky buttons for the fog lights, which reminds me this car has the fog lights on the front, and they're the hella fog lights, which are kind of like a rally style, and they are hella cool. Now, with this essentially being a Swedish motorway cruiser, I've got a very comfortable armrest here. I am, of course, in incredibly comfortable seats. Lots of places to store things. No cup holders, obviously, again, because, as I always say, there were no cup holders in the 80s. They didn't believe in them. But you've got a pretty decent sized glove box. You've got this nice big panel here, covered in a huge piece of this smooth, lovely wood. And then in there, you've got a pretty decent amount of space to store things. On the seatbelt buckles here, there's a little red light on it, which lights up to sort of guide the seatbelt in, so you know where it is. This also has an electrically operated sunroof, which at some point in its life would have worked. Now, apparently it is sealed shut, so there's no pressing this button here to open it. But I can still use this panel here to let in a bit more light, which is nice. Can't get this steering wheel to... Oh, it doesn't go up or down, it just comes in and out. That's interesting, because a lot of cars, they'll do up or down, but not in or out. Built into these seats, I've got an extendable telescopic height adjuster, which allows me to pump the seat up or down, as well as obviously you can adjust it to back and forward. And I think there's a little lumbar support changer there in the back as well. I believe there's a pretty decent amount of space. So what do you reckon, pal? Unfortunately, due to his sheer incompetence, backseat JJ not only set up the camera wrong, but the microphone was not connected either. The long and short of it, it's a plush space in the back with plenty of legroom and not quite so much headroom, but a 6-foot person can sit behind another 6-foot driver. Man, I am absolutely freezing. It's like 1 degree out there. This is not the time of year. This is why I've been hibernating over winter and not filming stuff. But at least in this Saab, I can put the heated seats on. Oh, there she goes. Maybe set to about 2 out of 3. That'll do. Heater up to full. Set it to the word heat, and then whack the temperature up. And I should warm up fairly quickly, I hope. Whack her into drive, and away we go. Now, the thing that becomes apparent when you drive a 9000 for the first time, especially one of these early ones in hatchback form, is they are quite rattly. They are not the most rigid things. That big open space in the back of the hatchback is responsible for that, I think. Quite a lot of creaks and rattles, especially from the back end, which they later did sort out, because obviously this car, it was a hatchback, then there was the saloon version as well. It is otherwise fairly smooth and refined, as you would hope from a Saab of that era. It is a luxury car after all. Despite all the big thick body panels that Saab used, it's still got that 80s charm of glass. You know, look at that alongside me there, all the glass, a thin A-pillar, visibility is really good. I can just about see the bonnet poking out in front of me. This is the 2-litre 16-valve turbo car. It's got 175 horsepower, it'll do 0 to 60 in 8.3 seconds. This has still got, oh, there it is, turbo kicks in. It's fantastic. It's just so very modern, because the torque, the characteristics of it, you know, I wasn't ringing the car out then. It was just doing 3,000-4,000 RPM, and it was just away it went. Put my foot down, kick down. Oh, yeah. And you can hear the whoosh of the turbo. It doesn't, like the previous 900 turbo, it doesn't like absolutely boot you with this like turbo lag and then, it's just more like, progressive, smooth acceleration. You know, it's all about what this car's about. It's luxury, isn't it? Plenty of power, even by today's standards. Even with this automatic 4-speed gearbox, which the SE came with the automatic, although you could opt for the manual at no extra cost if you desired. Automatic was the luxurious thing that you wanted. In the modern world of traffic and cars everywhere, with the auto you can just cruise along. And with this being a sort of smaller, for its day, a smaller engine with a turbocharger, the fuel economy is quite good. You know, 30 miles per gallon, no problem for this car. I've got my turbo boost gauge sitting in the middle as I accelerate there. I've got the rev counter telling me that I need to be economical by staying in the green area of eco. The brake pedal is like a brick. You really have to shove your foot on it and it doesn't give you any feedback, but they do work. Let's see if the cruise control works, which is on the stalk here. Well, it makes a weird noise when I press the button. On. It works. The car's accelerating without me doing anything, and then I'm 1980s cruise control. Cruise control, trip computer. I am an 80s exec. Once you're cruising along in it, it's just like any smooth modern car. You know, it's a joy. The steering is a bit vague, but I think that's all part of that more luxurious feel. It's not really a sports car as much as they'd wanted you to think it was. See around this roundabout. I mean, it's not particularly inspiring to drive in quickly around corners. Feel cool driving it. It's not quite got that same feeling as the Saab 900, you know, that classic Saab shape which everybody knows and immediately gives you this sort of like 80s Swedish architect kudos. It's not quite on the same level as that, and it doesn't stand out quite so much as those 900 turbos. This is more of a sort of underrated, understated Saab, isn't it, that people don't really know about, especially in this colour, this kind of green colour. It definitely doesn't stand out. I know what I've got, and sat in here in the Saab environment, in the, you know, with the dashboard, the seats, it's just, it's lovely. I really do. I do like this car. Still can't get over how this car is essentially the exact same age as me as well. We are brothers. Cruising along in my Saab. Got heated wing mirrors if I need them, with the sort of interesting design on them, like an aero design with two attachments for the outer casing. So the 9000, they actually made it right up until 1998, and it had multiple facelifts during its life. It started off with this flat front that this car's got, and then they slowly sort of tapered it and made it more aero looking as time went on. And I have to say, I'm quite a big fan of that later shape of the 9000. Despite it still being a very square car, it still looked good and modern, and in that sort of Volvo way. 9000, that's a big number, isn't it? Are there any other cars that were named with a bigger number than that? And I don't think there are. When I was a kid and I saw these on the road, I remember even then thinking, wow, a 9000. Wow, that car must be really special and really good. Although even then, in the back of my mind, when I was 8 years old, I knew that you could just name a car whatever you wanted. And in a way, calling it 9000 was like showing off a bit. I don't know, it's like calling a Skoda Superb or whatever, isn't it? When you think about it, that makes it 10 times better than the Saab 900 and 27 times better than the BMW 325. So it's a Fiat, or is it? Well, as I always say with these platform sharing things, it's not really that important what the chassis, you know, the basics underneath the car. Does it matter that much, really? This feels like a Saab. It looks and feels and drives like a Saab. I think I'd prefer the 900 just because it's a little bit more uniquely Saab shaped. The thing is, this is a luxurious car. It's very spacious and practical, especially for its day, and it would have been really quite the thing. You know, the performance characteristics of these cars is phenomenal. Famously, the 2.3 turbo, it accelerated quicker than a Ferrari Testarossa when it was in 5th gear. So there's a lot going for them, and of course the 9000 is a bit underrated, so it means that you can pick one up for not all that much money, and perhaps in the future, you know, it will be seen as a little bit more of a Saab classic. It feels cool to drive it, and I've really enjoyed my time with it today. Thank you again to Zach for lending me the car. Thank you to the owner of this car, who Zach is selling it on behalf of, who put so much money and love and care and attention into this car. Drove it all over the Europe and to the Saab museum. And of course, to you guys for watching. If you want to see a review of the Saab 900 turbo convertible, then click up there, and I'll see you in the next video.